At this time next week, you could be having cocktails with us. We are doing a Daily Detroit Happy Hour Wednesday, June 21st from 5 to 8 p.m. Both alcoholic and non-alcoholic options are available at Castelia Cocktails in Midtown. Go check them out. We would be glad to see you. That's June 21st from 5 to 8 p.m. There's an event on our Daily Detroit Facebook page, or send me an email, dailydetroit@gmail.com, with any questions. Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is a beautiful Wednesday, June 14th, 2023. I'm Jer Stays with two of my favorite people. Across the table from me is Norris Howard. How are you?
The skies are clear. There is no more smoke. Feeling great.
Oh, there is a huge difference with that. I will totally agree with you there. And Robin Runyan, Urbanize Detroit. So good to hear from you.
Thanks for having me again. My garden is growing again now that the rain has come. It's lovely.
I am very jealous. I think that's absolutely wonderful. I'm going to say that today's episode is brought to you by the letter F, because two of our big stories are about the Fisher Building and Ferndale when it comes to development. So let's kick it off with the Fisher Building. It's garnered a ton of attention online. I think the first time in a while we've done a tweet with 100,000 views, which is pretty good. But everyone's talking about it. Michigan State University, well, technically the Michigan State University Endowment, as that is often the fiduciary for these sorts of things, has purchased the majority stake in the Fisher Building. What are kind of the details with this one? Robin, you had some stuff up on your website.
The platform bought the building in 2015. They owned it for a while. They did some restoration to it. They've kind of been trying to unload it for a few years. It's been up for sale. This was, I think, a good surprise to read this yesterday morning. It's not just an LLC that's buying it, it's an actual university. And this is continuing this investment that MSU has started to make in New Center. They also invested in the Piquette Flats over in Milwaukee Junction, which is adaptive reuse project that we've talked about before. They're part of the huge Henry Ford Health, Tom Gore's $2.5 billion development that was announced earlier this year. So yeah, they're the majority owner of the Fisher Building now.
Well, and for some backstory, because a lot of people have sent me notes confused why this is happening. There was a negotiation a few years ago that was in progress between Wayne State University and Henry Ford Health to do research, more integrated kind of medical school stuff, all of that. That all fell apart with some political squabbling a few years ago. And so this is the result of that, where Henry Ford basically said, Wayne, we're going to walk away. They, kind of figured out a deal with Michigan State University. I looked it up. It is a 30-year deal, which is a huge thing. And now we have a completely different dynamic in this area of Detroit, where you have the University of Michigan investing a bunch of money. You've got Michigan State investing a bunch of money. And then you got Wayne State sandwiched in the middle. And so I think that there is a lot of shift happening in here. And when you see stuff like the Piquette Flats, to me, you're investing in residential. You're investing in things where you're going to be here a while. And I think this could be truly transformative for the New Center area, because eds and meds are the underpinning of so many successful cities going forward.
Yeah, I think this is doubly fantastic because we can't necessarily talk about this purchase and this building and this partnership without also mentioning that a good chunk of Michigan State's student body comes from the city of Detroit. It's about 8% African-American in their student body, with the vast majority of them coming from the city of Detroit. And so to be able to have that footprint right here in the heart, I think is fantastic. And you actually took the words right out of my mouth, Jared, is that not just the length of the agreement, but investing in that residential block as well is completely fantastic. And New Center is an area that's always had this sort of kind of potential brewing underneath it, where it was like, if the right investors could come in, the land had been developed enough, there's buildings here, it's on a major thoroughfare, Woodward, the boulevard, it's kind of got the perfect storm for investment if you really wanted to come down and do it. And I think Michigan State planting that flag right in the Fisher is a great way for them to kind of almost start a second revitalization.
Well, for a long time, we've talked about this on the show. And just recently, in fact, Devin mentioned it, Devin O'Reilly, about the frustration with, whether it's restaurants or things, it's been kind of hard to get things kickstarted in that Fisher Building area. Robin, how do you think this will impact some stuff?
I mean, I'm kind of taking a holistic look at it now. I think it's great. New Center has been one of those neighborhoods that like stuff has been happening, but this is really a huge like Kickstarter for more things to happen. So it's exciting. They are going to use the Fisher building. They're going to start like an incubator, and they'll have some educational programs, community stuff inside the building. It's also another one of those kind of public-private partnerships that we've seen happen outside of downtown, which I think is really important.
To me, this could unlock all the things when you're talking about restaurants, when you're talking about people living in those areas. The other thing about like med school, it's a lot different than your graduate programs, right? Like med school, you got people in their 20s, late 20s. You've got a different set of people that, although they're spending a lot of money on their education, that's also funded in a lot of ways from different sources, and they're going to go out to eat. They're going to go do these things. It's not like they're going to be running to the potato place every time for dinner.
Absolutely. And I used to live in New Center, actually right behind the Fisher building on Delaware. And that was one of my major complaints. There's a huge park right behind the Fishers. Beautiful park, beautiful neighborhood, these, wonderful buildings that have been maintained by the community over there. But there was nothing to do. There was nothing to do.
And it's always been bewildering that the only place you can go to for dinner before a show that's right there is Cuisine.
That was it. And even then, like, it was Cafe Con Leche was there at the time, and then that closed down. So
Avalon didn't make it.
Avalon didn't make it, which came after.
There was also a restaurant in the Fisher building that I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Zenith?
Yes.
That
Zenith,
place was wild.
Zenith did.
That was like somebody's inside of a brain from a TGI Fridays, and like a Red Robin exploded, but like vintage style.
Exactly. So I think this is really important. And then you were talking about the students and the med students that are going to be potentially living in this area because, like we said, there's going to be this sort of med school research component to this. And that corridor right there on Woodward is already starting to come back a little, but there just needs to be people who can walk to it, who live in the area to be able to patronize these businesses. And I think now with the addition of this development in the Fisher and the purchase from Michigan State, this is going to be a great thing. And, I know a lot of folks felt like, oh, is this a missed opportunity for Wayne State? I don't necessarily think so. I really don't. I don't think it's a mistake for Wayne State or a missed opportunity for Wayne State because for me, the footprint and the existence of arguably what I like to call the three big universities of sort of Southern Michigan, exclude or, Western is Western. We love Western, but you have Michigan, Michigan State, and Wayne State all within the city limits in a major way in the next 5 to 6 years. Is fantastic, is only going to help the growth of the city and only going to help people want to move here and stay here because, hey, if you're somebody who wants to write for TV and you go to NYU or something like that, you don't leave New York. You stay there for like the rest of your life. And so what we want is for people to come to med school, learn at Henry Ford, learn at Receiving, learn at these hospitals that we have here and stay in the city. And you're only going to be able to do that by letting the people learn in the city.
I think this is also a huge boon for the Fisher building itself, which, I don't know all the details, but I don't think it was the most successful of investments.
No.
On the private side, whether, it's just, I know that there was a lot of work put in and a lot of investment put into it, but the demand, and especially after COVID, the demand has been just fallen off. Robin, we haven't talked since this stat came out at Mackinac, but a 50% physical occupancy emptiness in downtown Detroit is a stunning number. And we haven't talked about it since Mackinac when that came out. And I definitely want your thoughts on that.
It's a tough transition right now. We need to figure out what to do with these office buildings. If this big Tom Gore's Henry Ford thing all goes through, it's going to bring 500 residential units to that neighborhood. So, where are they going to work? Are they going to be going to an office itself? I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for businesses to kind of get people into the office right now, if people want to.
I mean, I think that could be awesome and that could be wonderful. But for me, it's just like convert it to residential. Why are we trying to force people into an old paradigm, in my opinion, right? I think if we're looking at the growth of Detroit and we're looking at the growth of certain neighborhoods in Detroit, people want this urban, walkable, everything in my neighborhood sort of model. And I think forcing, I don't want to say, allowing, because that's different. But I think forcing people kind of into the old 1990s model of salarymen, you put on your suit, you go to the office 9 to 5, you come home. I don't think we have to do that anymore. So why don't we convert half to residential? Then these companies can turn a lot of that office space into more creative, collaborative office spaces with, more open models, and people don't have to go there every day.
But I also think there'll be some changes too in retail. Like one of the challenges, so the news came down that Smith & Company is now Vigilante. They're making a turnover. One of the challenges over there is space. Like some of these spaces are so huge. Some of the spaces in Detroit are so huge. And I think that maybe more restaurants and things need more sub 1,000 square foot places. Maybe we need more food halls. Maybe we need more things where the economics make more sense, and building that infrastructure. You look at the Detroit Shipping Company. People love it. People hate it, whatever. It is darn successful.
It works.
In the middle of an area that, you'd think, oh, well, yes, there are a lot of things happening on Cass Avenue, but it's a little tucked away. It is super successful, and it's successful because it gives them a touch of everything.
But the one downtown didn't work.
Well, it's because downtown is impossible to park at.
There's no parking, and frankly, not enough people live down there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, is that like the one downtown, I think there was a few issues that doomed that one. And we can discuss and debate this 100% because you make a very, very valid point. It's not easy if you're coming downtown to understand where to park to go for that food hall that was down there. I interviewed the owner of the Shelby down there who's been dealing with a number of parking issues, just a block away from there. And he's making it work, but business is way down. Business is shifted to the weekends. That food hall was right next to the federal court. You cannot park on the street next to the federal court. Like there is a number of things there. Whereas when you go to the shipping company, you have a semi-outdoor experience. You have parking right next door. Maybe they fleece you for $10, but it is what it is. And you have a bunch of street parking all around there. I think it's a different accessibility question because let's be honest, for those food halls, it's not by and large next door residents going to that thing. Those kind of food halls and those kind of places, they are populated by suburbanites.
Yeah, no.
I mean, that's just my thought. Maybe I'm wrong, Robin. I can fully admit I'm wrong.
No, I think you have a point. And just for me, as we kind of go full circle back around to the Fisher, I think it is more viable for you to think about doing those kinds of things in New Center and around New Center and around the neighborhood when you have sort of a talismanic sort of thing happening, right? So a part of how Midtown began to grow was because people were going to Wayne State. It was a recession. Land there was cheap. So people didn't move. They stayed in that area because you could live in that area for not that much money, as opposed to going back home to the suburbs or moving to a larger city. So a lot of my contemporaries who were at Wayne State at the time were choosing to stay there. So this sort of weird music artists collective started, springing up. And we know through the cycles of gentrification how that works. So the thing for me with the Fisher is that we can skip step 1 and step 2 of like the artists and then, removing unsavory elements and all that other stuff of how people view development and land development, and then go straight to here's a big important thing that are going to bring big important people with money to spend and time to spend it. And now we can build some residential and we can build some businesses.
Robin, there's a couple other properties included in this, including the Baltimore Garage and a couple of other vacant parcels. Does this portend more to come?
I think so. I also think that the platform was trying to sell some of their properties, so it kind of made sense to put them together. But I like that one of the garages, is a few streets away. So, we might start seeing more happen around there. Although in that area, there has been a lot of buildings being bought and redone over there. So I'm excited to see what happens with this. I'm glad it's not directly downtown because so much has happened directly downtown. We're starting to move further away, which I think is good for the city as a whole.
Well, yeah, I totally see that. Do you think that this cash can help the platform do some more things? I know they've made some big shots. There's some things that, they sold off or are looking to to move off and kind of reapportion their portfolio. But this kind of infusion of cash probably can help them, right?
I think so. I think, around 2015 to 2018, there were a few developers that took on a lot and weren't able to follow through with everything they put out there. And so I think a lot of them have tried to kind of focus more a little bit now. I like the Piquette Flats project that they're doing in Milwaukee Junction. It's right near Chroma, which they recently did. They're branching out into other parts of the city as well. So it's nice to see development kind of get spread around with different companies and in different neighborhoods right now.
For sure. Let's go up Woodward and get to the other half of our show, brought to you by the letter F, and talk about Ferndale. There has been a parking fracas, a parking debate up there, because there is a parking lot currently that is not developed, that has been there for a while, for quite a few years, I think, right next to Valentine Vodka. And that parking lot, in a lot of ways, serves Valentine Vodka. And there is a back and forth because a developer who purchased that land would like to build a development there. And it's kind of pitching people who, various groups in Ferndale kind of against each other, people who don't like change, people who want more urbanism and want more development, people who believe that it's difficult to park and they don't want to walk very far to different businesses. And I think that it's raising some interesting questions. And I'll add some historical context here. A few years ago, I remember kind of like an online thing that flared up where there were some hosts from Fox 2 News who went to Valentine, and on air, they got mad because they couldn't walk right next to the place. Now, I know that is a big thing in Metro Detroit. Ferndale is one of the few urbanized places in Metro Detroit. So there's kind of a back and forth there. Robin, why don't you help us set the table a bit more and kind of where we're at with this?
Yeah, this is the classic kind of urban development debate here. This Vester Flats development would bring 72 apartments to this parking lot.
Wow, I did not know it was that many.
Yeah, 72 apartments. And so the thing is that even itself, it's not going to have enough parking spaces for the people who live there. It's only going to have 50 parking spaces. So not only is it taking away parking, but it's also like building a deficit. And, there's a lot of parking on the other side of Woodward, but there's not so much on this side of Woodward. I am a person who will walk anywhere. I will walk a lot, and Ferndale is a super walkable city, but I get where the owners of Valentine and House Bayou are coming from. It's gonna hurt to have patrons, having to park further away. And we hate saying it. We don't want surface parking. Like that's if you're into urbanism, you don't want surface parking. You want something else, but the city hasn't come up with anything else yet. So that's where the problem is right now. And I will also say that the lot in question, that kiosk never works.
That's true.
I really like House Bayou. So if I drive there, there have been multiple times where I have there's been a traffic backup because the kiosk doesn't work and everybody has to go find somewhere else to park anyway.
I've ran into that kiosk too, not working, and it's kind of been a huge pain. Like, I'm torn on this because I understand there are a lot of people who have made the argument in our inbox about the idea that we should really look towards places where maybe not every apartment has a parking spot, those kind of things. On the other hand, this is Metro Detroit, and it's a different kind of function thing. We're not in Brooklyn, and I'm torn because, to me, I don't like surface parking lots. I think that even surface parking lots we should go ahead and put the apparatus. Like when I was in Brooklyn, seeing these great machines that you could actually, if you were a longtime parker, they would actually like make it double level or triple level to actually house more cars. I don't think surface parking lots are a great use of space, especially in an urban area. On the other hand, I understand like the net negative on this, and like 20-year-old me would have a different opinion on this than 42-year-old me who like lives in the reality of, even though downtown Ferndale is great, it's walkable, but it's not as complete of a street as you see in like a full-fledged city.
Well, it's not even just about it being complete. It's about just the nature of having a job in Metro Detroit. If you don't work from home full time, you have to drive, period. That's just the reality. So if you don't have a parking spot, that makes your life significantly harder to find a apartment that you might be comfortable with living at, right? I understand why developers are doing this, which is you're having your street level retail with 4 floors on the top, and you could build it out of wood so you get these tax breaks because you're not having to use concrete and all this other stuff. But for me, The apartment with the best idea is one of the oldest in downtown Detroit, is the old Trolley Plaza, which is now Detroit City Club Apartments.
Oh, the one that now let's not do the same design because the design looks like it's straight out of Khrushchev's blueprints.
It does. It is 1,000% Soviet brutalist architecture, right? You've seen this building, but there are 6 levels of parking on that apartment complex, right? I have never, in my 2 years of living there, I never worried about parking, ever. And so for me, it's like, do we need to necessarily have 6 levels of parking? No. But why not just build the parking lot under the apartment building, maybe have 2 floors, maybe 3 floors, and go from there? And we can eliminate street level parking. We can still have street level retail. We can still have 72 units. We can still have all this stuff. This is what I don't understand. We can have all the things, Jer.
Well, but see, that would change. There would be an argument back and forth. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, Robin, on this. You know, the skyline of Ferndale is changing, and there is definitely a tension between don't Royal Oak my Ferndale, because Ferndale has gone, like Royal Oak has gone up. Royal Oak looks like a small city at this point, and there's a lot of people who say, and I'm just putting all the voices out there, not saying it's my opinion, but there is a lot of people who say don't Royal Oak my Ferndale, don't make it taller. You know, I remember all the back and forth when it comes to whatever, the Ferndale House that it is. I remember seeing the Ferndale House because it's right in front of where our Pride booth was, with the idea of like, keep Ferndale quote unquote charming. The challenge with that on the other side is Ferndale is landlocked. There is no more area to grow people. And so if you want to add population and be able to keep up, you're going to have to build up. So this is a tension that's going on.
Yeah, and I've definitely heard that argument in looking at all the articles and feedback on this project that don't Royal Oak my Ferndale. People want to live there. People want to live in Ferndale. It's a cool little city. And the housing there, you know, they're pretty small houses. You don't have these big duplexes or multifamily. You know, you don't have a lot of those there. It's a lot of single family, smaller houses. So if people want to live there, you're going to need more apartments. And we saw, you know, the Ferndale Foods, they want to build in that lot over there as well.
I mean, that makes perfect sense to me, but
I'm going to issue a challenge to the citizens of Ferndale, all right, who say, you know, don't Royal Oak my Ferndale, okay? Do you want Ferndale to grow or do you want it to not grow? Do you want new stuff or do you not want new stuff? Do you want, you know, more tax base or do you not want more tax base, right? Because these two energies don't jive with one another. So as Jared said, if you want more stuff, if you want more things, if you want all of your quality of life to improve.
Well, tax base is the biggest part, right? Because every year everything gets more expensive.
Right. You have to get more people to live there and you have to build up. So for me, the skyline and this and this and that and the third. Half of you don't have lawns, so you're not worried about your grass. So what is this? I don't understand this ideology in the suburbs. Like Washington, D.C. is the only place with a skyscraper ban that it makes sense to me, right? Everywhere else, if you want more people to live there, you got to build vertically. So I don't understand what this argument and this pushback is with the height of cities. Well, I don't get it.
One thing as a longtime city resident, and I've heard this in the feedback, is there is a frustration, like, why can't this kind of stuff happen in the city of Detroit? You got this huge gap between Midtown and then all the way to Ferndale and Royal Oak, and you see this kind of thing, but it just kind of shows you that—
because y'all don't want to move down here.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing. It shows you that those places are desirable places to live despite the online snark, right?
Yeah. Okay, if it's like, why don't you want to do it down here in Detroit? Okay, then if all the people who previously were going to live in Ferndale move to Detroit and sap your population for a change, right? Let's flip this on its head. And your population gets sapped and everybody moves to downtown Detroit. How you gonna feel about that? You'd be feeling pretty bad about it, right? So for me, it's
at the end of the day, people don't like change. At the end of this thing is like, this is never going to stop going back and forth because it's about balancing different types of change and what people want.
What this lawsuit comes down to is that Ferndale is supposed to replace parking if parking is going away. We see that happening with this development. I get it. Nobody wants these businesses to lose patrons. What it comes down to, we don't have the transit that we want in the region right now. Ferndale is a destination, and while it's a walkable city, most people are going to drive there. So, like, where do we go from here? I'm just really interested to see what happens with this and if it sparks Ferndale to try to build parking and build development, because apparently it really needs it over there.
I know there's a high demand, and Ferndale is one of the top places people ask me about in the inbox when it comes to moving to Metro Detroit. You know, it's Detroit, it's Ferndale, it's Royal Oak. It's that Woodward corridor that's such a powerhouse economically. I mean, and Oakland County is still a huge powerhouse economically. We cannot sleep on that when it comes to money, Oakland County is where it's at. And there's no doubt about it. With this, I think there's kind of a blend that's possible. You know, Norris, I like your idea of you could build a garage. Like there was the Dot recently built in Ferndale, and there was a lot of back and forth about that. But if you add residential on top of that, there is so much you could do as far as tax base, as far as density, as far as more customers for those places. Because honestly, I've been to Valentine. I think they're changing the name of the tap room, whatever. Whatever one thinks about this particular spat, I've enjoyed their place a ton of times. And living across the street from it or a block away from it is pretty desirable, especially with places like House. And you've got, you know, all of that stuff happening in downtown Ferndale. There just aren't many places in Metro Detroit where you can do that. I mean, you're seeing apartments being built in Grosse Pointe Park because that's one of the few places you can do that.
Yeah, it continues to blow my mind. And obviously, I understand what we're talking about in terms of the lawsuit. I think the citizens have a strong case here. If the city is supposed to replace parking that they lose with development, rules is rules, right? Laws are laws, right? So, you know, I think the citizens still have a strong case here. But also at the same time, we here in Metro Detroit rail against surface parking lots. We rail against all this stuff. And obviously, you know, I think the district downtown is a whole different story, but we rail against surface parking lots. So when a developer comes in and says, all right, let's put something in this surface parking lot, the energy can't be that, oh, we'd rather have the surface parking lot. It is a logical fallacy. Like, it just doesn't make sense for the reaction to be that. If the lawsuit moves forward and it's all about replacing those parking spots, for me, I would then put the onus on the developer and to say, hey, can you put more parking into this development or in future developments? Can we put more parking with the residential developments or add an extra floor of parking in the residential developments? Because for me, as we continue to grow here in the suburbs of Detroit, the inner ring suburbs, this is the only solution that's going to actually attract those people. This is the only way you're going to be able to do it because there is no more land in Ferndale, in Berkeley, in, Royal Oak, in Hazel Park. There's no more land. These towns are not going to grow geographically, so they have to grow vertically, period.
Well, this has been a whole lot of conversation on a couple of great topics. I want to thank, of course, our listeners for listening. Make sure that you drop 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It is much appreciated. Tell your friends about the show. With that, I am Jer Stays, and thank you, Robin Runyan, for all of your contributions over at Urbanize Detroit.
Thanks for having me again.
Of course. And Norris Howard, good to see you, sir.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Now, you are going to be out of town next week.
Yep.
So we're going to have one Wednesday without Norris. So who knows, Robin? We might have to have you back, fill in here for us. And just so people know, on June 21st, we have a happy hour from 5 to 8 p.m. at Castelia Cocktails. Come say hi. We will talk and be merry. Both alcoholic and non-alcoholic options are available in case, since it's a midweek thing, you want to keep your pace or you just don't want to drink. That's totally fine. It'd be great to see all of you. Castelia is a great little venue, and we want to support those who support us. So come on out. Would love to see you June 21st, 5 to 8 p.m. With that, I'm Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit. I'll wait for Bootsy. Bootsy, the best dog.